Hello, everybody, and welcome to GC 365. We are on day 190, and today is July 9th. So we are more than halfway through our one-year Bible reading. I am Liz, and I am the Kids Zone pastor now at the Mill Creek campus for first, second, and third graders.
Yeah, my name is Jacob Masiolik, and Kathy, my wife, and I and our two boys have been coming here for 5 years now, or over 5 years, and we absolutely love it. And, I love helping out in Bridge. So
Yes.
it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, so Jacob was one of my volunteers in Bridge, and he's actually coming down to help me out in Kids Zone now. So he's a great volunteer, great with the kids, has a lot of information to give them. And so, yeah, I love having you help. All right, let's jump on in. So we are reading through the Old Testament, 1 Chronicles 7 and 8. There's a whole lot of names in this, a whole lot of names. So one thing that stood out to me in 1 Chronicles 7, in verses 1 through 5, we're talking about the descendants of Issachar.
Yep.
So they were all mighty warriors, and they were men and young men, totaling 87,000 of them. And I kind of did a little research, and to put that in perspective for people to understand, the Seahawks Stadium only holds 72,000 people. So there were more descendants of Issachar than could fit in the Seahawks Stadium.
Yeah, no, it's huge to think about. And I think that the amount of times that warrior is mentioned throughout this, it's pretty impressive. So, I know I've got two boys myself. I mean, they consider themselves warriors in a lot of ways when they play football, et cetera. So I could just imagine the amount of effort that went into training and raising these boys.
Yeah, 87,000. Yeah. That is a whole lot. So 1 Chronicles 8, there's one thing that stood out to me in verse 39. It says, Ulam's sons were all mighty warriors. There's that again, mighty warriors and expert archers. They had many sons and grandsons, 150 in all. I can't imagine that.
Nope.
I have two kids. When I first got married, I told my husband I wanted 5. Yep. He's like, a basketball team? I'm like, yes, I want 5 kids. Well, fast forward to when my son was 4 and his sister was 7. I was a nanny in the desert in California for 2 single dads in the Marine Corps.
Yep.
Well, they left for training and left me with their kids. So I had 5 kids in my house, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for a little over a month. At the end of that, I told my husband that was God's way of showing me we did not need 5 kids in our life.
Yep.
And I was no longer a nanny. So I can't imagine having 150 sons alone and grandsons. One thing that I do want to point out is reading through all these names in the Old Testament, it might seem boring, but they're important. They are an important part of the Bible. Everybody played a part in the stories in the Bible. And it's kind of like the movie credits. We see all of these names, but they all had an important part in the end result.
That's right.
So I encourage you guys all to push through.
Yeah.
If you can't pronounce the names, the Bible app will read it to you. And I love that as well.
Yes.
Okay, now moving on to Acts. We're reading Acts 27. And at this point in time, Paul is being held prisoner by a Roman officer named Julius. And they set sail from the coast of Asia because these men are being held captive so that they can be put on trial from Caesar.
Yes.
Well, in verse 3, it says, the next day when we docked at Sidon, Julius was very kind to Paul and let him go ashore to visit with his friends so they could provide for his needs. So this Roman officer is giving a prisoner some freedom. I really think that that's neat. And I don't know if it's because he hasn't been found guilty yet. He's just being held as a prisoner until he goes on trial. Yeah. But if we read about Paul, I believe that it's his godly character as well as his strong faith in the love that he shows that Jesus wants us to show, that he is allowed these little extra freedoms.
Yes.
And then we read on. They set sail again, and they came across some strong winds. It doesn't tell us why, but they came across an Egyptian ship that was headed for Italy, and it says that they boarded it.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, it became too dangerous to sail and stay on course. And in verse 9, Paul warns the ship's officers. He tells them that there's going to be trouble ahead. There's going to be loss of cargo. Their lives will be in danger, as well as maybe a shipwreck.
Yeah.
And that's just what happened.
Yeah. Now, I think that throughout the passage, it talks about how Paul is warning them. He's got that extra freedom. So I almost feel like the centurion Julius and his men gave that extra privilege and freedom to Paul because they sensed something about him,
Yes.
And I think he showed leadership throughout the ordeal. I mean, he told the centurion that, man, I can see our voyage is going to be disastrous, right? He talks about the great loss to the ship and cargo, like you mentioned, and also their lives. So I think that they probably thought, well, hang on a second. This guy's going to trial. He's probably just trying to get out of it, right?
Yes.
And I think that the example that he set for his captors and the fact that they were essentially his enemies in a way, right? They were holding him captive, but he still stayed in faith. He still showed leadership. He calmed everyone down, even though they're tying ropes around the ship. They're trying to hold it together, and he's just being in faith and preventing them from panicking.
Yes. So. And this story is a cliffhanger.
Yes.
We don't know what happens next. So that's one thing that I love. So now I'm really excited to read tomorrow's and find out what happens. But one thing that I wondered is if they encountered this terrible weather because they had the men held captive, or maybe it's because Paul was there.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't know.
I thought the same. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on to Psalm 7, we read verses 1 through 17. And in here, David is asking the Lord for protection from his enemies. And he's praying against their wickedness and to keep him safe. But he's also expressing his strong confidence in God, which he does a lot. Verse 17 really stood out to me. It says, I will thank the Lord because he is just. I will sing praise to the name of the Lord Most High. And here we see that David is going through these hard times. People want to harm him, but he is still proclaiming the name of God and his confidence in God that he will keep him safe. And so often I believe that we can hyper focus on the problem or the loss in our lives or whatever difficulties. But when we bring that glory to God and when we show strong confidence in our faith that God will get us through it, then that will bring you the peace, and we won't necessarily focus on the negative time because that's only temporary.
Yeah, that's right.
Did anything stand out to you?
Yeah, I think that if you have a good heart and good intentions, God will help you fight your battles. Right?
Yes.
It talks about preparing your weapons and having the shield from God. And also it talks about do not judge others, right? It says God is the ultimate righteous judge. So you don't need to pass judgment on to others. God is there to help you with that. And it also talks about if somebody doesn't repent or they have evil intentions, they're not pure at heart, their weapons will be turned back on them, right? So it specifically says here, behold, the wicked man conceives evil and is pregnant with mischief and gives birth to lies. He makes a pit, digging it out, and falls into the hole that he has made. His mischief returns upon his own head, and on his own skull his violence descends. That's a pretty brutal statement, right? So God will look out for you, right? Protect you with a shield, and you don't need to judge others. So I think that's the real takeaway for me from this is that God will help you fight your battles. And if somebody has ill intentions towards you or evil intentions, their weapons that they're forming will be turned against them.
Yes, that is great. Never even thought about that. Okay, so we're going to wrap up with our Proverbs. We read 18 verse 22, and it says, the man who finds a wife finds a treasure, and he receives favor from the Lord. So the word find implies that you are searching for something.
Yep.
And in here, it implies that a man is searching for a wife. everybody searches for a companion or a husband or a wife. And what I get out of this is that we need to be searching and praying to God for a spouse from God, a godly husband or a godly wife. A wife that is given by God, it says it's a treasure. A godly wife is going to bring blessings into your life. She's going to rescue the man from his natural selfish desires or being self-centered. But her femininity is also going to kind of make those harsh, sharp edges of a man's masculinity and kind of soften those a little bit, which I think some men kind of need. But she's also going to be a great companion as they go through life together. And I don't believe that a lot of people do that nowadays.
No.
They don't pray for their spouse, or that's not the first thing they look for. I know that we talked about what we see now is people are attracted physically, or they find somebody fun, or they're looking for financial security in a marriage and not necessarily somebody who is on the same page with their faith.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's really important, and a great point to make is typically I see, people getting attracted physically, like we mentioned, or mentally, where they might appreciate somebody's personality, but they may not have that spiritual attractiveness, right?
Yes.
So I think it's really important to put spiritual attractiveness in first place, just like you put God in first place, because the minute you start to compromise with your beliefs and compromise on any of those areas, you yourself become out of balance.
Yes.
We've all seen it, right? Where you might put your physical health out of balance, or your mental health out of balance, or your spiritual health out of balance, and your life becomes chaotic, right?
Yeah.
So I think making sure that you're not compromising in your beliefs and making sure that you are attracted spiritually to your husband or wife is super important to form that foundation for your marriage, and it helps you in marriage.
Yes.
Right? A lot of times you might come across a situation where you can lean on your morals and you can ask God for help, but also you can start coming up with sayings like we have in our household is what would Jesus do, right? So let's say the kids might be upset because there's people gossiping about them at school, or somebody might be cut off on the freeway, or whatever it is, right? It's just, what would Jesus do?
Yeah.
It's just forgive and move on, right? And having that power of God, I think, is really important. So spiritual attractiveness is definitely an important factor when you're considering entering into a unity under holy matrimony.
Yeah. And the Bible specifically tells us how a husband should be and how a wife should be.
Yeah.
So in here, we're talking about searching, looking for a godly wife. So look for the Proverbs 31 woman, a woman that's going to comfort her kids, raise her kids with the same beliefs as her husband. She fears God. She's a supportive wife and caring, as well as compassionate. And one thing that I have done from a very young age with my kids is I pray for my kids' spouses. My son's only 14, my daughter's 17. Who knows when they'll ever meet somebody, but I have been praying for years for God to put somebody with like faith into their life, because I don't want them to fall for that physical attraction, because that spiritual attraction is so important.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. And thank you, Jacob, for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.
See you later.